Welcome to the Explainer. Imagine looking out your window into a garden right now, and you spot two birds perched on a branch. They look really similar, you know? Maybe just a slight difference in feather color or the shape of their beak, but they aren't exactly the same. Would you know if they belong to the same group, or are they entirely different types of animals? It sounds like a super simple question, but biological classification is rarely just a dry list of facts to memorize. Actually, it's a lot more like a thrilling detective story where looks can be incredibly deceiving. Our focus today is answering one really fundamental scientific question: what truly makes a species? Let's put on our detective hats and uncover the hidden rules of nature.
Okay, let's dive into this central mystery. How do scientists actually decide if two animals are the same species? It's so tempting to think we can just look at them, right? Like, if two creatures look identical, they must be the same. And if they look different, they must be different species. But, well, if biology were that simple, we literally wouldn't need scientists. The truth is, relying purely on physical appearances can lead us completely astray. To actually organize the natural world, biologists had to search for a deeper, undeniable rule, a strict biological test that proves whether two organisms are truly part of the same biological family. We're going to look at some real-world examples today to see exactly why looks just aren't enough. Take these two absolute giants, for example. We've got the Indian elephant on the left, African elephant on the right. At a quick glance, they share an enormous number of similarities. They're both massive, gray, trunked mammals roaming the wild. You might initially assume they're just the exact same animal living in different parts of the world. But look a bit closer. You'll notice the Indian elephant might have strainer tusks, and its overall body shape has some pretty distinct differences from the African elephant. Biologists group living organisms into different kinds, and despite their overwhelming similarities, the Indian and African elephants actually belong to two totally different species. They are entirely separate groups.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, if I just find two animals that look exactly identical, then they absolutely must be the same species. But here's where the plot thickens. Even within the exact same group, individuals are never perfectly identical. Think about it. All organisms in a species share the same broad characteristics, but there's always what scientists call natural variation. Variation basically means that between individuals of the exact same species, you're always going to find differences. For example, if you look at a herd of Indian elephants, some have straighter tusks than others. Lots of them have these distinct pink markings on their skin, but those markings show up in completely different places on every single elephant. It's kind of like fingerprints. This natural variation can sometimes make it incredibly difficult to figure out if two organisms belong to the same species just by eyeballing them.
Because that natural variation makes visual identification so tricky, scientists desperately needed a foolproof method. To be absolutely sure, they look at one key behavior. Can the organisms reproduce with one another? It all comes down to this definition right here. A species is a group of organisms that can reproduce together to produce fertile offspring. That is the ultimate biological litmus test. Indian elephants reproduce only with other Indian elephants. They don't reproduce with African elephants out in the wild. Each species reproduces only with other members of its own species. This rule cuts straight through all the visual variations, the pink skin markings, the tusk shapes, and gives us a definitive answer to our detective story.
So the crucial point here is that this definition actually gives us a strict three-part checklist. For two animals to be considered the same species, they have to hit all three of these rules. First, they must be able to reproduce together. Second, that reproduction has to successfully produce offspring, meaning they actually have young. And third, and honestly most importantly, those offspring themselves must be fertile. This final rule about fertility is the absolute key to the whole shebang. It means that children must be capable of growing up and having children of their own. If an animal can't pass its genes on to a third generation, the biological line just stops dead in its tracks. And if that happens, the parents, no matter how similar they might seem, belong to different species. But nature loves a dramatic anomaly. What we're looking at here is a male lion and a female tiger. By our standard rules, these are entirely different species, and organisms from different species cannot usually reproduce with one another. But very rarely, something completely unexpected happens in a zoo setting. If two animals from different species are put into the exact same enclosure and they don't have a member of their own species around to mate with, well, sometimes they mate with each other. A male lion and a female tiger in a zoo can actually reproduce together. And the result is this perfectly healthy, massive animal called a liger.
Which obviously begs the question, if a lion and a tiger can produce a perfectly healthy liger, does that mean lions and tigers are actually the same species? Well, this is exactly where our three-part checklist proves its worth. Remember, the biological catch that solves our mystery. The offspring must be fertile. While ligers are large, strong, and totally healthy animals, they are a biological dead end. Ligers cannot reproduce. They can't have offspring of their own. In biological terms, they're infertile. Because the offspring are infertile, it completely fails the third rule of our species checklist. This lack of fertility is the exact, undeniable proof scientists need to confidently confirm that lions and tigers remain separate, distinct species, no matter what weird anomalies happen at the zoo.
And this brilliantly illustrates how scientists apply these rules in a real-world field test. Let's step out of the zoo and into the wild habitats of New Zealand. A scientist down there is studying two kinds of birds, the yellow-crowned and the red-crowned parakeet. Now, just like our elephants from earlier, they look remarkably similar. They share the same bright green bodies with literally just a variation in the color of the little patch on their heads. The scientist wants to figure out if these two kinds of parakeets belong to different species or if that head color is just a natural variation within a single species, like the pink markings on an Indian elephant.
To solve this, the scientist doesn't just sit around looking at their feathers, she looks closely at their behavior and reproduction. She's out there searching in suitable habitats for pairs of parakeets that are actively making nests. And here are her field findings. She finds tons of yellow-crowned parakeets pairing up, and lots of red-crowned parakeets pairing up. But despite living in the exact same environments and sharing the exact same habitat, she never ever finds a yellow-crowned parakeet paired up with a red-crowned one in nature. Because they completely avoid reproducing with one another, even when given the chance in the wild, the scientists can confidently conclude that they belong to two distinctly different species.
So how does all this build into the broader scientific method? Well, the scientist made a really strong conclusion based on her field observations, but in science, we always want to be absolutely certain. I want you to think like a true biological detective for a second. What further evidence would perfectly cement this conclusion? Would you go out and check hundreds of more wild pairs? Would you examine old museum specimens to map out deeper structural differences beneath the feathers? Or maybe start looking at entirely other species of parakeets to see how they behave? Science is an ongoing investigation. Keep questioning what you see out there, and always look for the hidden biological rules. And with that, Lesson 4.3 is completely in the books. Until next time, keep exploring.